I've been using Windows laptops and desktops for the last 18 years or so, and I've used everything from notebooks to gaming laptops and even systems so dated and so old they were practically time machines. And some of them I've built and some of them I've bought just as pre-builds. But this month, actually a few days ago this week, I actually switched over to the MacBook Air, and I noticed quite a lot of unexpected differences between Windows and Mac, including both pros and cons. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about the best and the worst parts of switching over from Windows to Mac, and also my experience just generally day to day in my workflow and how it affects my business and how things are just completely different when using a Mac in comparison to my Windows desktop, and just showing you how it's impacted how I run my business and just generally use my laptop, because I did actually have a Windows laptop before this one. So first, let me explain why I actually switched. So I used my laptop quite a lot. My main gig was YouTube, and I was a gaming YouTuber for quite a long time, and I still do it as a hobby, and I got around over 100,000 subscribers on that channel before we started in this little business channel that we're doing right now, and before I actually started up with e-commerce and dropshipping, which has become quite successful. And when I'm traveling, I do like to use my laptop a lot to be able to micromanage and just generally run my business operations, edit my videos and do various tasks on it. It's really convenient, especially when I have to do things like check my ads for the e-commerce business and just design graphics like thumbnails for this channel's videos in Photoshop. Now, the last laptop which I actually owned before I got the MacBook Air was actually, I believe, a Windows Acer laptop, which was pretty good, but it was a gaming laptop, and because of this, there was kind of some flaws and some shortcomings, of course. So one of these was that it was super thick because it had a graphics card in it, but I actually realized I don't really game much. I wasn't really playing many games whilst I was on holiday or on vacation or doing kind of like work trips or anything, so having just the extra bulk and weight for that purpose was just pretty much useless. And it had pretty good performance, but my biggest complaint with that Windows laptop was also the battery life. If it wasn't plugged in, the battery would just get killed in no time, which is kind of annoying. And the performance, obviously, of a Windows laptop also typically starts to dip when it's not plugged in, especially when you are playing games on a gaming laptop. If it's not plugged in, you'll get pretty poor performance, whereas if it's plugged in, you'll notice a night and day difference. But MacBooks are renowned for their really long battery life and how long they just generally last ever since they introduced the M chips a few years back. And like I mentioned before, just another thing which I really hated was, particularly when traveling, just how heavy and thick the laptop actually was originally, the Windows one. It always weighed down my backpack. It just had extra stress on my shoulders and on my back, and I just always ended up getting shoulder and back aches. And it was just really heavy and it was inconvenient. And because of this, I couldn't actually take it anywhere because it was so heavy and causing so many problems. So when I had the chance to obtain a brand new laptop, I actually did some research and decided to go with the 13-inch MacBook Air M3, which is actually really light and really small for what it is. And I'll also be taking on a trip in about 2 weeks at the end of this month to kind of try it out and see what my experience is in comparison to my expectations. Now, I just really like the idea of being able to carry a laptop with me because it was so light, and then maybe just turn up somewhere like a Costa or a Starbucks, or just go inside a McDonald's when I'm eating lunch and just flip it open and do a little bit of work. And because it was so heavy, I couldn't do that with my old laptop, but with this, that's now a possibility. Just use the McDonald's Wi-Fi and just do a little bit of work during my trips and kind of relax during the day, and just use that as an excuse to just sit in a hotel cafe and use up a little bit more time even after I've eaten. And that's just kind of like an attractive idea to me when I've got a lot of time abroad. Now, at first I didn't actually think I could transition to a Mac. There's a lot of reasons for that, but we actually used them back in film school back in the day in college. I'd studied film and media studies in college, and we used them, and I found them quite a little bit clunky back in the day, but what I really liked was the UI and the whole interface of them and just the user experience. But I did find setting up folders and the editing softwares to be a little bit annoying, but apart from that, I did kind of like them. I just didn't think really that I'd end up with one. But over time, I kind of found myself getting used to it as I started to use it, and I've used it quite a few more times over the past few days, installing new software and getting it set up, and I'm starting to become a little bit more accustomed to it. And also, I have an American friend who keeps telling me about how good Macs are, and he's giving me a little bit of advice, so that also helps with that too. Now, the first thing which I actually realized when switching over to this MacBook, and the thing that I actually noticed the most was particularly the build quality. Some of the Windows laptops I used were nice, but there's a reason why Apple is all about branding and people are so obsessed with buying their really expensive products, and that's because they have high quality. We can't really contest that, and it's lived up to it so far. It does feel quite premium holding it. It has like an aluminium body to it, unlike the plastic laptop which I used before, and it's cold to the touch, which is kind of like a feeling that's nice. The only downside which I didn't realize is I kind of feel like a little bit staticky around it, or maybe static electricity. I'm not sure if that's a fault of my laptop or if it's just generally because the aluminium body is metal, so it's going to typically be more conductive. And the charger is a 3-pin charger because obviously I'm from the UK, so it should still be grounded, so I don't think it's anything to do with the charger. But I have heard that ordering the extension cable is a little bit better and that should be grounded, so I've ordered that, so we'll see how that changes. But that was just one thing I like to point out. Now you can tell that this laptop was designed with minimalism in mind, and that's because there's not really that many ports on it. You just have the 2 USB-C ports on it, and then you also have an optional MagSafe power outlet to charge your laptop in that too, but you can actually charge it via the USB 2s. And also don't forget, it does have a headphone jack for sound, so they're not forcing you to buy Bluetooth headphones like a lot of the new phones like the Samsungs are, so that's also a good plus, because I do like using a wired headset most of the time when I am on a laptop or a desktop. Now the downside here though, when I was comparing if I should get the MacBook Pro or the MacBook Air, is because there's so much minimalism with this laptop, there's not really many ports or slots, and that also means that there's no SD card slot or SD card reader in the MacBook Air, which is kind of a little bit annoying, especially me when I'm doing videos and kind of film work. This means I can't just easily transfer my photos to my MacBook Air. But I could obviously optionally get like a USB extender or a USB device to do that, but that just means I've got more gear to bring with me when traveling, which is kind of what I was trying not to do. But it is obviously easy to transfer, particularly you can also use a camera cable too, which is quite light, so there's nothing really I can complain about there. But it does seem quite convenient to have that extra port for an SD card on the MacBook Pro, so that does make me a little bit regretful, but I don't really think it's that big of a deal. Then there's also the differences in the keyboard and the trackpad itself. The keyboard just feels really nice to use, and obviously it looks really aesthetic, but it's a lot different to the Windows one. Now I'm usually really fast at typing on Windows. I'm kind of one of those people that can type super fast, obviously because I've become accustomed to the default Windows keyboard layout and the size of my own keyboard. But the keys are a little bit different on the Mac, and because it's different on the system, and because it's just generally a smaller keyboard, because the model is the 13-inch one, I'm not yet really at that position yet where I can type quickly on it, and I do stumble when I'm typing a little bit still. But obviously that's just because I've got it, and I'm sure I'll get used to it. But switching between the Windows PC and the MacBook is going to add a little bit of friction in getting there. Now what I don't like though is what I've realized is MacBooks, or just Macs in general, on a lot of their keyboards, they don't have a specific delete key. So there's no dedicated delete key on this laptop, and I'm not sure if that's consistent with all the Macs or not, or if that's just a thing with this laptop. But it is a little bit annoying. You can just set up the right click function and it's not really too much of a big deal again, but when you're used to having one, it's just kind of annoying not having one. But I also really do like the lock button. In the top right of the keyboard there's just a lock button which just goes to the lock screen, so if you need to go AFK as it were, or go to the toilet, or just like leave your hotel for an example and your laptop's still there, or if you're just sharing a house with people, I don't know why you'd need the lock button, but if you want to lock your laptop for any reason, it is there and it's just convenient to do it. I also really like the trackpad, so if you want those smooth movements, the MacBook Air has really nice trackpad. So you have like those smooth zoom in functions and the scrolling movements when you hold it with your 2 fingers and doing things like that and zooming in with your fingers. They're really nice and it just feels really responsive, although you do need to go to the settings in the Mac if you do want to set up the normal right click functionality which you'd have on a Windows laptop. So if you want to like key up the right click at the bottom right of the trackpad to be a right mouse click, then you do need to set that up. But it's a simple fix and then you can get it to be like a Windows laptop. Now the sound quality in the built-in speakers in the Mac is actually quite nice. I've not tested it out too much because I did have to put it on silent mode when I got it.
People give it to me. So there we go. Thank you.
But I usually use headphones. Now one thing I haven't tested is the Samsung wireless headphones which I have. I know that it does support the AirPods because they do recommend you like as an upsell to buy the AirPods on the Apple website. I mean, obviously they're going to do that. So I do believe it has the Bluetooth support, but I'm not really sure if it will support the Samsung ones because I know Apple, obviously they want you to buy their own products. So I'll have to test it out, but I imagine they'll work because I have paired up my Bluetooth mouse, which I bought, which I guess is an Apple product, so you'd expect it to work. But this Magic Mouse I bought for the laptop does work, and that's Bluetooth too. So I imagine any Bluetooth device will just work. So hopefully the headphones will too. Now, I still do prefer the Windows operating system as a whole, but Mac does still have its benefits. With the smooth animations, the UI, and the general overall user experience, Macs just feel super clean in general, and they just feel professional. It has that kind of professional vibe when you're holding it. So for me, buying this as a business laptop, it does feel professional, and I feel like this is definitely that professional business laptop which I did need. I also did really like that Macs come with a lot of built-in software, which I kind of believe is a lot more than you get on Windows. For an example, Office is usually something you just have to purchase a license key for on Windows, but on Mac you just have a whole plethora of software which you can access as soon as you boot it up. You have softwares which kind of just do all the same things as the Microsoft ones, so word processors like Word, softwares like PowerPoint and Excel, to name a few, but they're all inclusive without the price tag that you typically would probably spend on a Windows machine. And obviously there's always freeware which does the same thing, like OpenOffice, but it's nice that Mac just package a bunch of software that you can just get without downloading it. Not to mention a bunch of other useful apps in there too, but of course real big premium apps from Apple like Final Cut Pro, they do need a license, so they're not going to come for free with a system. But maybe there's things like iMovie in there, I haven't really looked, but there's still a lot on offer for you to use. Now there is one little bit of a complaint. Now an Apple system is better if you have other Apple devices. For example, I have a Samsung Android phone, I don't have an iPhone. I'm not really a big fan of iPhones. I think they look really clean, but the thing which stopped me from buying them is that I heard that they slow down the older models, so you have to always upgrade. I buy a new phone every 3 or 4 years, basically when it breaks. I don't want to really have to buy trendy new devices very frequently. So because of this, I don't benefit from the Apple ecosystem that you get when having multiple Apple devices. So I can't use an iPhone or an iPod or an iPad, things like that, when connecting it up to my Mac. And things like AirDrop, FaceTime, they won't really work as well with other devices. Well, they just generally don't work. You can't switch from FaceTime from your Mac to your Android as you can with an iPhone. You can install some third-party software though to kind of bridge this gap. So there is actually softwares that you can use as a workaround, which allows you to AirDrop things from a Mac to an Android device, but I haven't really typically taken those for a spin yet, so I can't really give a review on those. One thing I did also like though is on Mac, there's like a convenient little built-in password manager which kind of saves your passwords to the main Apple core apps. So for an example, Safari, the web browser, will save all of your passwords conveniently to them and then autofill them into all the fields as you need, and you can just auto log into accounts. Now this doesn't work with Google Chrome though, so if you do switch from Safari to Chrome, you're not going to be able to benefit from this, which is kind of a shame. Obviously Chrome has its own password manager built in, but if you want to use Apple's devices, you will benefit from it. Now some things which I don't like. File management is a little bit trickier on Mac than it is on Windows. For example, you can't just directly copy the file path of a location you're in. On Windows, it's much easier to just copy the paths of directories and just skip from one place to another and skip to folders. But on Macs, the browser is a little bit more cumbersome to find where you save things or to just generally navigate around. On Windows, you can just hover your mouse over an open application and preview that window by hovering over it, but you can't do that on Mac. And on Windows, when you use an app to screenshot things or the built-in one on Windows, you can just save things directly to a chosen directory. But if you use the default Mac app for screenshots, screen recordings, it kind of just puts it on the desktop. You can't save it to a specific location, and it just ends up just adding a whole bunch of clutter on your desktop, which you have to sort through or delete or move to other folders, which can get a little bit annoying, and it just clutters it. And the whole point is Macs look really clean, but they're not going to look clean when you clutter the desktop, right? Now Windows, multitasking is also just really a nice experience, right? You can just dock different apps all to different areas of the screen, or dock them. You can split apps on one side of the screen to the other, put them in the corners. It's just really easy to do, and you have like loads of things set up if you're working on things. Whereas on Mac, it's a little bit of a trickier deal to do that, and sometimes it flicks them to other desktops that you have to switch from rather than different areas of the screen. So you have to manually resize stuff sometimes, which just generally wastes time. But there are, however, some apps which you can actually download, third-party apps, for a more Windows-like docking experience, but the inline one that comes with a Mac is just a little bit clunky. Also, some crucial softwares which I use on Windows just for fun or leisure, for an example, Visual Studio, sometimes I just develop little apps on it, or I use ChatGPT to help me like code little things for convenience. I can't use that on Mac, which is a little bit annoying because Mac has its own coding language and its own operating system, which is removed from that. But fortunately, you could use a virtual machine to emulate Windows to actually run some of these apps. And there is some softwares that allow you to run Windows apps on a Mac, which are also cool too. But you're going to have some roadblocks to actually get there. And on Steam, if we're talking about gaming, then not all games support Macs too. But luckily, there is a little Apple icon in the Steam library providing you're logged into macOS X. It allows you to filter all of the games in your Steam library which are actually supported on a Mac device. And of course, this also goes for emulators. Not all emulator softwares work on Mac, so things like Xbox emulators are going to be like a little bit of a struggle. You probably won't be able to run those. But some, like PCS X2, which lets you play PlayStation games, do actually work on Macs, and there is some software for the older kind of consoles that you can use. So let's now talk about how using a Mac has actually impacted my business and my day-to-day productivity and experience. So first of all, I've been able to mainly use my Windows PC because I am right now at home. But when I do travel soon, I will be strictly just using this Mac. But I have used the Mac quite a bit this past week. Now, since the nature of my business is online, it can be fully remote, and sometimes I just generally get tired of working at home, or if I go on a trip with my friends or family, or just manage to be able to get out and go somewhere, I do like to travel, so going somewhere else can be a nice idea. MacBooks are actually pretty powerful even when they're not plugged in. Earlier we talked about how Windows laptops are basically just routed to the charger for their performance, whereas you'll notice a huge performance drop in those Windows machines when they're unplugged. Macs don't really have the same performance drop when you remove the charger. They run pretty well even without it plugged in. So MacBooks are also well known for their screens. The MacBook Air has a 13.6-inch liquid retina display, which uses True Tone 2 technology, and even though it's a lot smaller than my last laptop, which I think was 15.8 or 15.6, it still doesn't feel tiny when I'm actually using it. It doesn't feel like I'm using a pocket-sized tablet. It still feels like a laptop I can work on and I can actually still see things on, right? Which I'm actually really thankful for because I was hoping it wasn't going to be too small. So one of the main things that you will notice as well when first using a Mac is there's actually a notch at the top of the screen. It's not a perfect rectangle. It's like a rectangle, but then it's like a notch down, which kind of loses you part of the display. But it's something you eventually do get used to, and especially since the menu bar is actually at the top of the screen and you have like the icons still at the bottom, it's not too much of an issue. And you do have your webcam in that too. When you open up dark programs, or if you're watching a movie, it won't just like be in the way. It'll still just all be black right in the corners. I don't, however, though, like that when I have like an app open on the desktop on Macs, it just shows like a tiny little dot to signify it's still open, which is kind of annoying. And then it just keeps these recently closed apps which you've closed down there too in the bottom corner, and you have to manually close them off. Whereas on Windows, I can just close them, they'll disappear, but if I want them to stay there, I can just manually pin them. So it's a lot better on Windows in that regard too. So let's talk specs. So I got the 2024 MacBook Air M3 model, and I actually upgraded it. So the base model, it has a 16-core neural engine. It uses the MagSafe 3 charging port, has 2 Thunderbolt USB 2 or USB 4 ports. It has a Magic Keyboard with Touch ID, Force Touch trackpad, and a dual 35-watt USB-C power adapter, which obviously you can pick the models of that. I also upgraded this thing so I could get the max memory possible. Obviously the MacBook Pro lets you upgrade way more, but on this I got the 24GB of unified memory and a 2TB SSD just so I could put loads of footage and software on there, but I'm obviously not looking to clog it up intentionally. But from my experience, getting a laptop with like 250 gigs or 500GB is just really not enough, and you just end up clogging up too quick. And it seems to mostly handle what I do actually throw at it pretty perfectly too, since I don't really do too many intensive things on it, and I'm yet to actually test out gaming on the Mac. The editing also doesn't really seem to have any hiccups yet. I have tested out Filmora on this thing. It seemed to run pretty well and open pretty well and just generally perform okay and handle the footage I had fairly easily. I have heard that like the rendering and previewing of videos on a Mac can like be a little bit annoying in comparison to Windows, but I haven't experienced that yet, so I can't really comment on it. Now, even the base models of these MacBooks do perform well in benchmark tests. This is of course in comparison to PC Intel models, and for example, since Apple actually produces their chips in-house now using mobile technology like mobile phone chips, they get some really great metrics, and the battery life is still super high too, and that's kind of like their secret. I was also pleasantly surprised when I checked out the webcam, because obviously I want to use the webcam, let's say if I get in a call with someone, or if I need to do some kind of meeting, or just use it for professional reasons, or if I join like a Zoom call or a class, I want to be able to use that, and of course use the microphone. And the webcam's pretty decent for what you get. The microphone quality is pretty good, and the webcam is really clear, but of course this is dependent on the level of lighting that you have in the room at the time. So if I have poor lighting in here, it's going to look a little bit fuzzy, but if there's really good lighting, either from the windows or the direct artificial light, it does actually look pretty good. So when that good quality lighting is present, it makes it look really attractive, and especially when you're doing screen recordings or calls when it's smaller, it looks a lot more aesthetic too. And of course, I did test this out. I used some freeware softwares like OBS Studio and the built-in Mac screen recorder, and it looked really cool, as well as a paid software which I actually bought a license for, which was called Screen Studio, which actually was also really nice too. So I'll be testing that software out a little bit more, and I'll probably be using that for some videos on this channel. Now, I don't think I'm going to upgrade this thing in the next few years for any reason. I don't really think there's any need to, and I can't really see myself returning it, but we'll just have to see my experience from here on out. So that brings me to my conclusion. So if you're not looking to do anything too intensive, or you're not needing to utilize too many Windows specific applications, and there's no real workarounds to get them actually set up, then go for the MacBook Air. I do recommend it, and I think you'll be highly surprised, just like I was, if you use it, especially if you've never used a Mac before. But that is to say, I still don't favor Macs over Windows computers, right? I still am a Windows fan, but I'm learning to use it, and I think there's some really great benefits to it. And it's also really kind of cool to have both and be able to use both, just interchangeably. So if you're a Windows user and you're just considering the switch over, I think the new M chips will actually hold up well. And one thing I forgot to mention too is the actual system itself is actually super quiet, and this is because they don't have those loud fans like Windows laptops. They're super quiet even when they're under workload, so it's also another pro of the Mac devices. But I don't really know if this impacts if they'll overheat or not. I've not really heard any bad things about that. So I hope you've enjoyed this small little journey where I kind of recount my experience with the Mac from this last week of getting one, and kind of like a review of sorts. For more business videos and content like this one, make sure to like the video and subscribe. And also, let me know in the comments if you have any questions about the MacBook Air, which I forgot to mention, and if there's just anything I generally missed. Maybe you're really good with tech and maybe I got something wrong. Do let me know in the comments below, and let me know your thoughts on Macs in general from either the perspective of a Mac user or a Windows user, particularly if you've also used both. See you soon.